To chapter 3. Alright, so now we're talking about adding and subtracting fractions. So the first thing we have to remember is that when we are adding and subtracting fractions, like fractions have a common denominator and unlike fractions have different denominators, and in order to add and subtract we need common denominators. That's where the denominators are both the same number. So if you think about it, we need something with the same pieces, the same size pieces, in order to add or subtract them. So I have this very simple 1/2 plus 1/2 equals 1 because we keep the 2. We don't add the 2 together, but we add the numerators together. So we would get 2 over 2, which reduces to 1. So if you forget the rules, go back to something that you know how to do. So here we have 1/4 plus 1/4. Our denominators are the same. So we add the numerators and keep the denominator the same. Now we don't want to leave it as 2/4. We want to reduce that. 2 goes into 2 once. 2 goes into 4 twice. So our answer is 1/2. Here we have a common denominator, which makes our problem a little easier. Then we just take 4 plus 1 to get 5. So our answer is 5/7. Again, here we have a common denominator. So we add 7 and 11 to get 18. Now we want to make that into a mixed number. 12 goes into 18 one time with 6 left over. Again, I don't want to leave it as 6 over 12. I know I can reduce that. And that reduces to 1 and 1/2. So there's 2 ways to do this problem. I'm going to show you taking it into an improper fraction. Give me 11, 12, 13. So I have 13 elevenths plus 10 elevenths. Add across the top, which gives me 23 elevenths. 11 goes into 23 twice with 1 left over. So this is the answer in an improper form. This is the answer as a mixed number. Subtraction is the same. We need a common denominator and we subtract our numbers. 7 minus 2 gives me 5. I keep the same denominator. So my answer is 5/9. 6 out of 12. Now you might want to reduce here, but you don't want to do that when you're adding and subtraction because you need that common denominator. So here they're giving us a common denominator. So we don't want to reduce because then we'd have to just make ourselves a common denominator. So 6 minus 2 gives me 4 over 12. I know that reduces. 4 goes into 4 once. 4 goes into 12 3 times. So my answer is 1/3. Here I am going to show you the other method. I could make this into a improper fraction, but I know that 2/5 is larger than 1/5. So I can take 2/5 minus 1/5, which gives me 1/5. 5 minus 1 gives me 4. I could have made these an improper fraction, subtracted. I would have gotten the same answer. Now here, 1/13 minus 2/13 it's not larger, so it would be a little bit more difficult to do. So I'm going to make this an improper fraction. 13 plus 1 gives me 14 thirteenths minus 2 thirteenths. My answer is going to be 12 thirteenths. So here we're just going to make equivalent fractions, using a different denominator. So 8 times what gives me 40? My answer would be 5. 5 times 8 gives me 40. So I also have to multiply the numerator by 5. So my answer is 45 over 40 is an equivalent fraction to 9/8, just rewritten differently. If I would reduce this, I would get 9/8. Similar, I'm multiplying 3 times 7 to get 21, so I have to multiply 4 times 7. And that's an equivalent fraction. Finding the least common multiple there are many different ways to find the least common multiple. What they're actually asking is, what is your common denominator? If I had 21 and 49 as my denominators, what would my common denominator be? The easiest way I've found to do this is to write the numbers into a grid-like system. What divides into both of these? 7. 7 goes into 21 3 times. 7 goes into 49 7 times. Now I need both of these to be 1. So there isn't anything that goes into 3 and 7, so I have to do it separately. 3 goes into 3 once, and then my next step is I'm writing a 7. 7 doesn't that. 7 goes into 7 once. So when I multiply these together, that's my common denominator, or my LCM. So 7 times 7 times 3, which is 147, is the LCM of 21 and 49. So if I do 18 and 72, you can start out with larger numbers. I'm starting out with 9. I know 9 goes into both of them. 9 times 2 is 18. 9 times 8 is 72. Then I know I have 2 divided by 2 is 1, or 2 times 1 is 2. 2 times 4 is 8. So I already have my 1 in this column. So I need to get a 1 here, so I'm going to put a 4 here. So when I multiply this row right here, this column actually, I get my least common multiple. So 9 times 2 times 4, which is 72, is my least common multiple. Alright, so now we're going to add our fractions, and between 7, 4, and 2, my common denominator would be 28. So 7 times 4 gives me 28, 4 times 7, and 2 times 14. So if I multiply 4 times 7 to get 28, I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. Likewise, 7 times 4 gives me 28, so I have to take 7 times 1. And here I have 2 times 14 to give me 28, so I have to take 1 times 14. Now that I have a common denominator, now I can add right across the numerators, and I would get 25, and that's my answer. Over here, my common denominator would be 54. So what do I multiply 27 by to get 54? 2. So I take 2 times 2. And here I take 9 times 6 to get 54. So if I multiply 6 times 9, I also have to multiply the numerator, because I can, as long as I keep it in the same proportion or the same ratio by multiplying it by 1 in the form of 9 over 9. So 4 plus 9 gives me 13 over 54. Now when I go to a subtraction, I also need a common denominator. Between 3 and 4, my common denominator would be 12. Four times 3 gives me 12. So I'm multiplying this fraction by 3 over 3, which is 1. And I'm multiplying this fraction by 4 over 4, which is 1. So 3 times 3 gives me 9. 4 times 1 gives me 4. Nine minus 4 gives me 5, and I still keep my common denominator of 12. Over here, my common denominator would be 63. So since I have 63 for the first one, I don't have to do anything to the 19. And I know that my common denominator is 63 because 9 multiplies by 7 to give me 63. I always want to go larger than smaller. So I have to multiply this by 7. So 7 times 9 is 63. So then 7 times 1 gives me 7. 19 minus 7 gives me 12 over 63, and that reduces. 3 goes into both of those. 3 goes into 4. 3 goes into 12 4 times. 3 goes into 63 21 times. So now we're going to estimate our answer. Since 2/3 is greater than 1/2, I'm rounding this 4 up to a 5, and since 1/4 is less than 1/2, I'm keeping that a 2. So my estimated answer is a 7, and my exact answer, I'm going to make both of these into improper fractions. So I have 14 over 3 plus 9 over 4. And then I have to find my common denominator, which is going to be 12. So I'm multiplying this fraction by 4 over 4, and this one by 3 over 3. So I end up with 56 over 12 plus 27 over 12. Add those two together, I get 83 over 12. 12 goes into 83 6 times with 11 left over. Again, I'm going to make this into a common, first I'm going to make it into 5 6 plus 13 ninths. My common denominator would be 18. So I would have to multiply this by 3 over 3 and this by 2 over 2. 3 times 5 gives me 15 over 18. 2 times 13 gives me 26 over 18, which gives me 41 over 18, which is 2 and 5/18 as a mixed number. 18 goes into 41 twice with 5 left over. So here, this fraction is larger than this fraction. So I'm just going to work with my fractions to subtract. So 5/12 and 2/7. My common denominator would be 84, which is just 12 times 7. So I'm going to multiply 7 times 5. So I have 5/12, which I'm multiplying by 7 over 7. And I'm multiplying this by 12 over 12. So 35 over 84 minus 24 over 84, which gives me 11 over 84 as my fraction. Now I take 26 minus 16 and I get 10. 10 is my whole number. 11/84 is my fractional piece. So here, how much fencing is needed to go around the whole garden? I am going to add my like fractions. So I'm going to add my 24 and 1/2 plus my 15 and 1/2. And I know my 1/2 and 1/2 equals a whole. So that's actually like saying 25 plus 15. Which gives me 40. And then I'm going to add my 19 1/4 and 15 3/4. So when I add that, gives me a whole. So that 19 becomes 20. 20 and 15 is 35. 40 plus 35 gives me 75. So if it's 75 feet, 75 inches, 75 yards.